All right, we've got our TotalBoat Sport Dory on a couple of sawhorses here upside down, and we're just about to paint it. I want to show you a few things before I painted it. I did put a piece of Kevlar tape right down the middle that covered the joint between the other two pieces of Kevlar down the middle, and then I decided that I wanted to fair that all out, and I used TotalFair because the TotalFair is a very easy product for me to use. You know, it's very simple to mix, and it goes off pretty quickly. It sands very easily. Basically, all I used it for was to fill in the nap of the cloth, because you just can't sand the cloth at all. It won't sand. You know, where I hung the cloth over the edge or anything like that, I would trim that off with a chisel, and you can actually plane it, but you really can't sand it. So we filled in the whole nap. And there's a few things I wanted to show you. I've got a little bit of it right here that's dry already. And I don't just pick sandpaper up and sand it. What I do is I scrape it. Now look at that, look how nice and easy that scrapes down. That's the easiest way to take TotalFair off as far as I'm concerned, and it comes out nice and fair and flat. You know, if I sanded it, it would be sanding alongside of it, and this way here I'm able to concentrate my effort right on top of the pile of putty that I put on there, and it really works good. I'll move over to another spot and do a couple more spots for you here. All right, now I'm moved over to another spot here, and you know, it's got a little bit of a buildup on there, you know, not much of one. There must have been a little bit of an imperfection in there, and I decided to spread a little bit more putty over it. So, like I say, rather than sand it even a little tiny bit, I'm just going to scrape it down first. And you can see that the spot will actually end up a little different color than the rest of the putty that's on there. That's because you can't mix it exactly the same every time. It comes out a little bit different color, depends on how much green or how much blue you put in it. But it really helps you decide where you've applied it. So just like that, very, very simple. Then I'm just going to take a little block of sandpaper, and I'll just go over it with a little block of sandpaper like that. Just back and forth, no machine whatsoever, just like that, flat as can be. Now these Red Devil scraper blades I get through Jamestown distributors, and I've got it in a homemade handle. I've got some handles, some old wooden handles that I really prefer over the plastic ones, but there's really nothing wrong with the plastic ones except when you're using heat, you can melt the handle, but the wooden handles don't melt, so I use the wooden handles all the time doing different things, and I use a scraper all the time for every imaginable kind of thing, all kinds of paint surfaces and scraping down, you know, finishes and smoothing up surfaces. You know, after I've planed something, I'll pick up a scraper and scrape it, sometimes double diagonal, and they just fair things down. It's a little bit of a trick getting one nice and sharp, but I think in one of these next videos I'm going to show you how I actually go about sharpening one of these scrapers. Now what I'm really doing here is fairing out the putty that I've applied to the nap of the cloth. I filled the nap of the cloth in with this putty because there's no sand in the cloth at all itself. You just can't sand it. So you fill it in. And I also put a 6-inch strip of Kevlar right down the middle over the lap in the other cloth that I had put on, and I had to fair that out with some putty. So it went down nice and flat. It was a standard weave Kevlar, so it went down really flat, and I didn't have to add much of a filler to it at all, but there is a little bit of filling to do. And I was very careful about how I spread the filler too, because I spread it out thinner than it really needed to be. And as it starts to go off, if I think it's deficient anywhere, I'll apply another coat right over that coat and spread that over top of that coat. And I'm able to get it down. If it had to apply too much at once, it wouldn't go down really smoothly. So what I do is I put it on in layers, and then I scrape it out double diagonal, and then you can see that it takes very little sanding to get it smooth. All right, I'm going to clean it up. Once I'm done scraping, I'm just going to take a brush and a shop vac and clean off the surface. So I'm going to put a little on my rag here, not too much, and I'm just going to wipe down the whole surface. And this is what they recommend that you use before you use 2-part epoxy primer. So I don't want to put anything foreign on there. It would seem to me you could use alcohol and different things, but This is the recommendation, so this, like I said, this is what we're going to do. And it's working really nice. It picks up all the dust. Yeah, this stuff works really, really nice. It's a little bit different than wiping it down with alcohol, I'd say. It picks up, traps the dirt, traps all the dust right in the rag with this reducer on it here, so that's a good thing. We're going to get it as clean as we can get it. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect because whatever dust is still left there will be in the primer coat and we'll be able to sand it right out, so it'll come out pretty nice here. So we're just going to finish up the bottom here, go over it one more time, and then we're going to go over the sides one quick time, right down the laps, make sure the whole thing's nice and clean before we start painting. Okay, we've got it all wiped down and she's finished up. We're ready to mix up some paint. We're going to use 2-pot epoxy primer. So we're going to mix that up, and then while it's sitting, incorporating, we're going to take and tape it off. So let's mix the paint. Now we're over at our mixing bench here, and let me just show you what we're going to be working with. We've got TotalBoat 2-pot epoxy primer reducer. Now we wiped the boat down with reducer because it's compatible with the primer that we're going to be using. We're using TotalBoat 2-pot epoxy primer, and this is the base coat right here, and this is the activator right here. And we've got our mixing pots. This is what we're going to actually be using for a finish coat, and I'm going to be using a little foam roller to spread the paint, and I'll be tipping it out. Now I've got a brush, and I've driven a little nail alongside the brush or in the brush right here. That lets it hang in the cup without just falling over or submersing itself in there. A couple little tiny tricks, and I'll show you a few more tricks when we open the cans of paint here. I'm going to poke holes down through the little lip of the can right here. That's so that when you pour it, it runs back into the can, and it's easier to get the top back on nice and tight. So let's get going. You see me do this to every can of paint that I open up. Now, I learned this trick a long, long time ago from a guy named Eddie Woodson, who was a painter at Wickford Cove Marina in 1967, and I've been doing it ever since. It helps the top of the can go back down a lot easier because you push that paint that's in the lip of the can down into the can of paint itself, and it just seals up a lot better. You know, otherwise, you have to dig all that paint out, especially bottom paint. When you pour bottom paint out of a can like this, it gets a lot of paint in the lip of the can. All right. Now this one, I've got to shake. All right, well. Now I've got a stir stick, and I'm just going to check to see if there's any sediment in the bottom of the can. There was just a little bit, but we've got that already stirred into the rest of it here. But I'm going to stir it for a little while anyhow, just to make sure that it's really, really incorporated really nicely in there, the solids into the liquid part of it. So we're going to stir for a little bit here. Now we're just going to strain the epoxy primer base because it could have a little bit of sediment in it, so I don't want it to be in the finished job here. So I've got it measured off in my pot down here, and it strains through the strainer pretty slowly, but all right, now I'm going to pour a little bit more, and I want it to come up to my first black dot right there. Now I'm on the 1-to-1 scale. I've poured it up to the first 4. Now I can set my primer base down, and I'll put the strainer in the base can right here, like so, and let that drain out. Now I'm going to take my 2-pot epoxy primer activator and pour that up to the second dot on the 1-to-1 scale that I've got here. So I poured the first one up to the first 4, and I'm going to pour this one up to the second 4, like that. A little bit more, just like that. Maybe a touch more even. Just like so. Now we'll set that down and pick up a stir stick and mix the two together. Now it's pretty simple mixing right here. That's really nothing to that. That mixes up really nicely and quickly. And now they recommend that you let this sit and incorporate for 30 minutes before you spread it. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to mix it up a little bit and then just let it sit there, and we'll be painting shortly. While we're waiting our 30 minutes induction period, we're going to go over and tape off the boat here. Now I'm going to use some 1-inch blue tape to tape off the guards the first thing. I'm using 1-inch blue tape because it stretches around there a lot easier than going with anything wider. Once I get that first piece on and get it on in the right spot, then what I'll do is take a wider piece and cover the entire guard so that I don't get any pigment on it. Now I'm just going to take my mixing stick here and wipe it off with the roller because I don't want it just dripping all over the place. So I'm just going to take all that excess off the mixing stick and set my stick down over here. And then I'm going to pour some in my roller pan, very simply, like so. I'll save a little bit. I'll clean that up with the roller. And now I'm going over to the boat. So I've got that. Well, now let's get started rolling here. Now I'm using epoxy primer. I like epoxy primers. I like all epoxy products, but epoxy primer especially is great because it kicks off for sure. It's catalytic. You don't have to worry about it drying. We know that it's going to harden. And that's really a big advantage, that's for sure, because I'm going to have to sand it a little bit. The boat's not perfectly perfect here. You know, it's got a little tiny bit of roughness to the surface, and this will stabilize all of that. We've already coated the boat one time with a soaking epoxy. You know, it's like a penetrating epoxy. And that worked out really good. That stabilized the grain, so we were able to sand the grain without raising the grain. So I really like that product. And I like this product too, just as much. So this is really making it look nice. Even that cloth looks smooth. And I had to fill the nap of that cloth, considerable amount of filler on it to fill that nap up. But boy, it worked out great. And this is really going on nice. I did very little sanding on that putty that's on the bottom of the boat. What I did was I scraped it with a paint scraper. You know, I applied it very thinly, and I scraped it with a paint scraper. Then I'd apply a little bit more of it and scrape that, and a little bit more of it and scrape that. And the thing with it was I didn't get any dust. You know, I try to do things with very little dust. You know, I just don't like having to wear the masks and all those different things, so I'm able to get around those kinds of things with methodology, and worked out pretty well. So look at that. That's really starting to look pretty nice. So this TotalBoat 2-part epoxy primer is a durable and versatile marine finish. It's for use above and below the waterline, and we're using it for both right here. It dries fast, adheres to just about anything, and it's very aggressive. It gets a wicked grip, and that's what I'm looking for here. It also sands and fills really, really well. It's available in white and gray and quart and gallon kits. So we're literally rolling right along here, and we're going to get the bottom done first before we go on to the sides. Now, I'm going to get a brush involved here and brush the laps first and then roll each plank individually. You know, that's just the way I've decided to do it. I suppose you could do it other ways, but that's the way I decided to do it. And I think it's working out really nice. So I paint one lap, then I'll roll that plank, paint the next lap, and then roll that plank, and I'll just work my way right down one side all the way up to the shear. You know, and I can go back and touch it up any any place I want if I get a run, or I think it's on too thin or something along those lines, you know. This is the first coat, and I'm going to find out a little later on if I put it on a little too thick or if I put it on a little too thin, but I'm not a professional painter per se, but you know, you learn as you go with painting, and we're learning as we go here, and it's all coming out perfect, so we're happy about it. So we're learning as we go here, and it's all coming out great. So there's our first coat of epoxy primer on the boat, and I think it's a little thick in spots. I didn't thin the paint at all this time out, but I think the next time I paint it, I'm going to paint it with exactly the same primer, and I'm going to put some reducer in it so that it spreads out quite a bit thinner, and I won't get that roller nap in it. I may even consider actually painting the whole boat with a brush, so you know, it remains to be seen yet, but we're coming along pretty nice. Look at that sandpaper cut. That dust just falling right down to the next lap. Now it's pretty smooth up in here because I've already sanded it some, and you can hear that the paper's just sliding really nice and smooth along the surface. But like I said, there's places on the boat that have got a little bit too much paint. It didn't have enough reducer in it, I suspect, was the problem, and it's got like an orange peely finish on it, like this. Well, the whole boat really had a little bit of it, but not bad at all. So you can tell the difference. You can hear it here. It's smooth as corn silk right here. You can hear it, nice and smooth. Then you get onto the orange peel, and you can hear the noise that it makes on the orange peel. You can also feel it under the paper, so you don't even have to look, and you can sand it. You know, I know when it's done just by listening to it or feeling it under the paper. I'm only using 220 sandpaper on a rubber block here, and that's as far as I'm ever going to take it. I'm not going to get into 320 or any of that kind of stuff. This is it right here, and it works great. So look at that. Didn't take very long, and that orange peely finish is gone. Now we've got a couple planks left to go, and I'll be done sanding, and then we'll be on to putting the next coat of primer on it. The last thing that I did want to show you is that we're going to add a little tiny skeg to it back aft here, because the boat will not stay on course perfectly well without this skeg. This makes it kind of track a little bit better. Every dory's got a little skeg like this on it. This one's not really going to be any different, so that's what we're going to do now. It's a piece of quartered white oak. Our next video is going to be installing that little skeg. It really isn't much work to it, but it's interesting, so we're going to make a video out of it. And the only other thing I wanted to say to you is we started a Patreon page. Now there's a link to it on this video, and also a link in our web page or our website, so I'd love to have you go there and check it out, because it would be a fantastic way for you to be part of this whole situation that we've got going on. We really need your support in more ways than one, and that would be just a great way to do it. So go check out our Patreon page, become a Patreon if you like, and we'd really appreciate it. So thanks very much for that.